Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of Full Funnel Live Show. So today we are going to host it with my co-founder Vladimir, and today's topic is ABM case study, the behind the scenes of a campaign we did with Vlad that generated 76% reply rate and 6 opportunities on a really small, or what we used to call ramen budget, right? The reason why we decided to come up with this topic, as in our community Trenches, by the way, if you are not a member of Trenches, check the link. We welcome you. We had a chat about practical ABM case studies, and lots of people, and recently also Kira from Canada asked if you can share a good case study of engaging with strategic accounts in case if you know ICP, ideal customer profile, right? If you have all the data about your best customers, basically how to warm them up and activate. Usually, with Flat, we are sharing our clients' case studies, right? And today we decided to share our own story. Basically, how did we validate the idea of fullfunnel.io? Our company, as you know, it's really young company, it's just 1 year old. And how did we validate our idea, our offer, how we generated first contracts. And because this campaign is something that we also, this entire framework is the framework that we use with our clients as well. But in this case, we can explicitly share all the data. We have nothing to hide. So again, you'll have time to ask all the questions. You are very welcome to ask your questions in the Zoom chat or ask your questions live. Just switch on your camera and go ahead. And for everybody, just a short note, if you are listening to this recording on podcast, on Spotify or iTunes, check the link to the YouTube video, because we are sharing slides and examples, so you can see some practical stuff. We have a bunch of examples today, so I hope it would be super valuable. Before we'll start, can I ask you guys a quick question? Where you are all from? Curious to hear. And while you're chatting in a Zoom chat, here is a quick agenda just for you, so you'll know what we are going to talk about. First of all, we are going to discuss the lowest hanging fruit to build an effective account list for a pilot campaign. So basically, what the sources you should look at when it comes to building the first list for a pilot campaign. Next one, which is, I believe, really important, is how to validate your message before the outreach. Next one is why most B2B companies suck with warm-up programs. And I have a very good example for you. I believe you'll love it. Next one, how to personalize your pitch. I know this is one of the most common questions. And finally, overview of the campaign material. So we'll be sharing what exactly was included, how exactly we were reaching out, etc. So we have people from San Francisco, Ukraine, Germany, Kiev, India, Toronto, Portugal. So quite Belgium, quite international audience. Thanks a lot for joining us. So I hope it would be valuable. Again, guys, if at the end, if at some point you'll have questions, feel free to type it in a Zoom chat. And if you want to ask it live, just mention it to Vlad, and Vlad will call you. So you are very welcome to join the discussion. So let's go. Let's start with the first one. Basically, how we made our ideal customer profile, including account segmentation and disqualification. We had a very nice chat with Vlad, because that's critical, right? When it comes to account-based marketing, you know that there are 3 approaches: one-to-one, one-to-few, and one-to-many, right? So which means one-to-one, it's 100% personalization. One-to-few is where you personalize per vertical and per specific role. And then you have one-to-many, where you personalize for a broad vertical. You come up with a broad unique value proposition that resonates with this specific vertical. So I believe that disqualification criteria is extremely important to build your account list. We had a wonderful discussion with Vlad, and I believe, Vlad, you can share the process, how we went through the entire disqualification, not disqualification, but entire account segmentation list creation.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and share this case study. And like Andre mentioned, nailing your target is like the most important step in an account-based marketing campaign, because if it's all about stacking the odds in your favor, and you really want to select those accounts who make the most chance, who makes the most chance of being with a fit, who make the most chance of being that you can close them, right? And so for that, we use account qualification and disqualification criteria. And so how do you come up with your criteria? Well, really, it is about looking, first of all, it is about looking at all your customers that you have and figuring out which are the most profitable, the best fit, and in other, using other criteria, like what are the best possible segments to focus on and who are the best possible customers from that segment. Now, what is really important, it is that you're actually doing that based on your existing customers. And why is that important? Because in other words, you're basing that on evidence. You're not basing that on some assumptions. You're basing that on actual, best customers, right? So how did we come up with that? Well, basically, it's all about figuring out what do these best customers have in common, and also what do maybe some of those who are not a good fit have in common, to come up with the disqualification criteria, to put it very simply.
And also, just to make it clear, we were looking at our most successful case studies. As probably some of you know, we were running our own companies. I was running GetLeader for 8 years, and also another small boutique agency called Advice. And Vlad was running a company called Crows Labs. So we were analyzing the previous case studies, in what industries we had the most success, the same we are doing with our clients, right? So we're analyzing where they have the most successful product adoption when it comes to product companies, or where, if it's a service-based provider, in what vertical they have most successful case studies. So that was critical. Next one, I believe it's really interesting criterion, that we definitely need to touch, is track record, a number of case studies. Can you please share why we decided to include it?
Well, it's very related to what I just mentioned. We know that for us to be successful, we have to make sure that there is at least a good product market fit, and that actually the customers of our clients are happy and are getting the value from the services or products that our customers are selling. So this is like such a key important factor that we use this as a qualification criterion here, right? And we even check, what kind of, we check two things, right? We check whether they have good case studies and testimonials, but also what kind of customers they have, because we only work with companies who have high ACV, who work with, enterprise or upper mid-market segments. So that's another thing that we can then also go and check, what kind of customers they're working with and whether that's a good fit for us.
I would like also to touch a part about executive profile. Might be a little bit weird why we mentioned that executives shouldn't have a marketing background, but from our experience, we have seen that when somebody from executives team comes up with a solid marketing background, and person spends some decent time in trenches, as we used to call it that way, and had some process, it's extremely hard to change the mindset. We have tried it multiple times. It didn't work. So we decided that if a person has a marketing background and is not willing to change the perception of marketing, how it's done. If person comes up and says, I just need more leads, and then this person thinks about marketing that it's all about of combination of paid acquisition, performance marketing, SEO, and some kind of fancy creative outreach, then yeah, from my point of view, this marketing is doomed. So we are not going to play with this. So that's a kind of the first initial set of account qualification and disqualification criteria. So the next point was to build a list of accounts for our pilot campaign, right? So in this case, we want to share with you the lowest hanging fruits when it comes to building an effective account list. Where should you start looking at? So I believe because Vlad was in charge of building account list, I believe Vlad can share more here.
Absolutely. I was also reflecting on the account selection criteria, account segmentation and disqualification criteria. I really remember something that happened in our company. And so when we started together, working together, I had a bunch of sales calls, and I had actually, to be honest, I wasted a lot of time. And the reason was that we didn't really nail this criteria that well. And so what happened after that, we were reflecting on what's going on, and we were talking about it, and we said, yeah, we need to really do this. We need to eat our own dog food, right? And so once we have done this, it was just amazing. I mean, the impact that this had both on our revenue, but also I had less leads, more revenue, and it was really literally like that. Had so much better conversations, better fit accounts, and much better deals. But anyhow, coming back to the actual account list, and again, it is about stacking the odds in your favor, right? You want to pick those accounts that are not only a good fit, but that are also, let's say, showing some sort of engagement or some sort of intent or some sort of either engagement or intent. And looking first at the LinkedIn data. Why LinkedIn? Well, LinkedIn, there's so many reasons, but for a lot of B2B companies, for us, this is certainly the case. LinkedIn is by far the number one channel. And we know that people who, because we are so active on LinkedIn, we know that people who do engage with our content, who do follow us and, come to these sessions, etc., it makes a huge difference. Like, first of all, it makes a difference because they know what they can expect from us. They are in the right mindset. There is to be honest, there is little sales that I need to do during those sales calls. I mean, people get I had people come and tell me about our case studies, right, during the sales call. So this makes a huge difference. And again, if you want to have something like that, if you want to have, again, stack the odds in your favor, you want to check these engagement signals. What are those? Well, those are, like in this example here, engagement profile visits. Those are engagement on your posts. Those are, people who attend your LinkedIn events. Those are people who are, obviously like chatting with you in messages. And at the same time, don't forget, of course, fit your account selection criteria.
And one more important thing that I believe we need to mention is that if you are doing demand generation, right? If you are sharing content by demand generation, it also makes sense what I mean by demand generation. It's sharing the content that grabs attention of your target audience, right? Educates it and showcases your expertise. So for us, it was the lowest hanging fruit. You just check this data and you find a list of people who are already aware of you, right? So the chances, if we'll add them to our pilot campaign, that will have a positive reply rate would be really high. That's why I'll always say that demand generation is not a standalone strategy. It's always merged with account-based marketing. So the second one was leveraging IP identification software, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still remember, I'll be honest here, you introduced me to this and I was kind of skeptical in the beginning. And the reason that I was skeptical was that it's, on the one hand, it is a long-term game, but actually the reason why it's a long-term game, it really depends what kind of engagement you have on your website. And that's the key to make a distinction between somebody, reading a blog post or somebody really checking your key pages on your website. So I'm talking about, in our case, our consulting page, our trainings, the product features, pricing page for SaaS companies, things like that. That obviously means something else than somebody reading a blog post. And I still remember, I was actually, and we'll probably come back to that in a moment when we talk about the warm-up. So, but it was a person who was already warmed up, went through this initial campaign, and some months later, and was in the meantime also engaging with our content, etc. But some months later, I think even like they started visiting our consulting page, etc. And it's just like, okay, I said, okay, let me do it. And I reached out to them and said, yeah, can we help? And they said, well, the rest is history. Let's say they are one of our case studies right now. So definitely worth the effort checking these engagements.
Yeah, so the next one was the newsletter. As you know, before launching Full Funnel, I was running Get Leaders newsletter. So I'm just giving you an example. We just created a segmented list of everybody who has clicked, because in every email I include a link to our service page, right? So I just made a list of people who clicked that link at any time when we launched, when they joined the list, right? So we had the list of these people and it was pretty easy. Again, somehow they were already aware of us. If they were in our newsletter, with everybody joins it by their own will. We don't add people, to our list. So it was, of course, we got their permission to contact them, and these people were checking the page. So it was as well low-hanging fruit. And
Andrei, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have an interesting question from Konstantin. He was asking, how many leads have you got this way, and does this scale?
That's a good question. Basically, I mentioned this in the beginning. We are talking right now about the pilot campaign that we wanted to generate before we wanted to run before fullfunnel.io was even created, right? So our company didn't exist at all. So our goal was to, first of all, validate our offer, validate the idea of our sprints, right? Validate our unique value proposition and positioning. And first, we aimed with Vlad, if we'll sign 3 contracts from that campaign, that would be a good benchmark for us, that we need to do this and move forward. So that was the goal. And in terms of scaling, look, we have, I know that's quite often, we receive this question quite often about account-based marketing. You can scale it pretty easily. You can scale it to new verticals. You can scale it to new markets, etc. All depends on your resources. But again, keep in mind that the best results are coming from the campaigns that seems to be not scalable. I know this question quite often comes from people who say, well, I want to set up automation because it's scalable, it's predictable, etc. But I would be, maybe I am a little bit biased, but I would say that automation is not scalable. Mass market is not scalable. Reaching out to a broad audience is not scalable because you can just burn out your market really quickly, and then you'll be thinking, okay, so what should be my next steps? So Hope it answers your question. Before we started the campaign, basically the next step was we just described to you, right? So we were looking at different sources of intent data to identify potential accounts to include into our campaign. And then there was like a critical question, who we should add to our pilot campaign, right? So there was engagement criteria. And we decided that for us, the engagement criteria was visited work with us page, basically this consultant page, twice or spent more than 5 minutes on that page, LinkedIn engagement at least with 5 posts, downloaded gated content. By gated content, I mean our free crash courses. Then visited product pages, 2 visits in last 14 days. By product pages, I mean, at that time, I'm referring to Get Leader website, not Full Funnel, because as I said, it wasn't existed at that point, at that time. So I was checking who visited courses. And finally, total time on the website, more than 30 minutes. That was the key engagement criteria. But the next step, basically, before reaching out to these customers, was validated message, right? Okay, so that question, just quickly, we'll read the chat. So from Konstantin, that question was related to looking up people that engage with your content. Okay, so, well, we'll have time for Q&A, so whenever you would like to join it, we can chat about this. I'm happy to share everything. So the next point was, before reaching out, before crafting the pitches, right? The idea was to validate our message with, if our idea at all makes sense to our potential prospects. So our idea, I will quickly cover it. Our idea was, because we had with Vlad existing customers, and based on them, we selected the best ones, right? And then we made our ideal customer profile. Our idea was to validate our value proposition. So what we did is just we created a simple survey with an idea of our value proposition and with so-called unique value proposition amplifiers, basically why our service might make sense for you, what's the benefits of it. And then we send it to our prospects, and as you see, this is how we came up with the idea of prospects, existing customers, sorry. How did we come up with the idea of full funnel marketing approach and less leads, more revenue? So basically, this is what 14 of our customers to who we reached out voted the most, and we used it as a key, let's say, as a key motto, as a key positioning message. So the next one was Warmup play, and Vlad actually was in charge of it. He loves it, so I believe he will share it.
You know, if you would ask me, like, if now I had to reach out, and actually this is not if, it's actually true. We were planning to reach out to the top B2B tech companies in Belgium. That was one of our goals, and this year. And you know, I thought, like, okay, let's do this. Let's invite them to our podcast. And this was the first campaign that we are, you know, sharing here the results. But actually, I did this recently, and it's just amazing. Like, I got, and I'm talking about the biggest companies, reaching out to the CMOs, reaching out to the top people there, top executives. In this first one, we got a response rate of 75%, but I actually got an acceptance rate now of 75%. It's just amazing how easy it is to build relationships. If I had to build relationships with key people in the market at any time, this is what I would do. You know, next to starting communities, which is another story, but I would go and I would invite people to a podcast. And what is really good, other than getting these high response rates, it's also that you really get the time to build a relationship. And the way that we do this, I don't know if you have these slides or not, but basically we have several conversations with people. And the way that we do this usually is we say, you know, I say something like, you know, let's have a pre-production call so that we can nail the topic and I can present you in the best possible light, which is 100% true, right? This is like 100% true. There's no bait and switch or anything like that. This is really like what helps me like nail what I should be talking to them about. But at the same time, you can like talk to them. You can ask them questions about their key initiative challenges. truth be told, I mean, I'll be honest here. I just like ask a lot of questions that I would ask during a discovery call. So it really gets you in front of the right people. You can build the relationships. You have several conversations. You make them look good. You make them feel good by the end. But at the same time, you're also learning a lot about them, and you're actually qualifying them.
I would like to add one more practical thing why your outreach worked, right? Because we were reaching again.
Okay.
Somehow they were aware of us, but we, aside from LinkedIn data, when we had the engagement, when we were tracking website visitors, right? We didn't know who exactly visited our website, and we were reaching to companies with 1,000 plus employees. So, like, let's say mid-size in terms of world scale, but anyhow, it was hard to reach out to VP of marketing or to CMO. So what worked for us is that we created, and basically why they should join the podcast, we created a dedicated content hub, right? And when they checked the content hub, they immediately saw the faces of thought leaders. I believe you also recognize these folks, right? We added some episodes that immediately build this proof, right? So they saw, okay, these well-known thought leaders were featured in this podcast, so it totally makes sense. Then they see slides about me and Vlad with the links to the guest posts that we have done, which was social proof by itself. And then two more important things about the full funnel B2B marketing show, where we described what we are going to talk about, etc., and the process. So that was really important, and that made us success, because the key is also we didn't reach out, probably what Vlad didn't mention, we didn't reach out only to VP of marketing or CMOs. Sometimes we were checking if we have common connections, and we were reaching out to marketers from these companies and then asked, like, so we prepared this, let's say, podcast deck, and would be great if you'll check it and see if it's a good sense for your company. Would you like to be featured? And this way we played with their ego and helped them, right? Because they quite often are in charge of PR mentions, of media mentions. So that was a really good play. And they were, yeah, so it looks so professional, guys. It's really good job. We are we are going to introduce you to our VP. So that was another way to
very quickly to address the question. I think there was another question from Konstantin, and so people already knew you and you already had the podcast. Well, I think there are a couple of things that I just wanted to share about it. So we did this 2 times. Like the first time we used a lot of intent data. The second time, I just didn't even use the intent data. I just went for the top companies. That was my goal. I wasn't even checking whether they engaged or not, and a lot of them haven't. So what worked there a lot was going via referrals, like people with a common connection, etc. Worked really, really well. I was personalizing my outreach 100%. I was, engaging with them. If they would, share content on LinkedIn, I was engaging with them before reaching them out, etc. And that's where I had 75% response rate, acceptance rate, not a response rate. Now, you ask another question. Yes, we did have a podcast, and that helps. We had good people on the podcast, that like social proof and everything. But we have done this as well with one of our clients, where they just started a podcast. They didn't even have it like published. They didn't have anything. The only thing they had was the slide deck, the content hub that we just showed you. And actually, they started reaching out to people without that content hub, and we're getting some responses. And well, here's a little trick. The trick is that if you don't have a podcast and you want to do this, you first reach out to your existing customers, to people who you have warm relationship with, because once you do that, they're much more likely to agree, and they become your first social proof, right? Second is, like I mentioned, our client didn't even have it, but then they started, because their target were like managers and executives in like large companies. They have a communication department. And, with the podcast, they were a little bit afraid, if I say something there, I don't want to misrepresent my company. Am I allowed to do that, etc. So what we did, we made this content hub, and we made the frequently asked questions for the communication department. And that really suddenly made our client look much more professional and really also helped address these objections. And they also had a very good response rate, even though they didn't really have that podcast.
So several ideas as well. What we, again, coming back to our case, why did it make sense to our prospects to join the podcast, and how did we leverage, the insights? Because quite often there might be a question like, well, when you have Chris Walker at your podcast, then you expect quality content by default. When you have a random VP of marketing, that would be, or let's say CEO of, because when we were reaching out to, let's say, considering global scale, these are small companies, but for us, it's for full funnel, these are mid-size or tier 2 companies. We were inviting executives, basically somebody from executive team to COO or CEO to our podcast. We used to ask really great questions that we are leveraging on our LinkedIn profiles. And these questions were, look, you are CEO of tech company, right? And quite often you are prospected and approached by salespeople. Can you please share what's broken in this approach? And how would you, as a CEO, how would you like to be prospected? That's fantastic insight. It's way better, to hear it from the real executive than reading from a bunch of sales blogs on how to prospect executives of tech companies. Just listen to the market. These insights were priceless. So this kind of unique content that we could easily extract from these people, right? So the same way asking questions about account-based marketing. As well, there was, as we build that trust, they also love to share all these insights, right? Then we were able to talk about their goals, their priorities, their challenges, the challenges they are facing during these goals. And then we had a really simple way to introduce ourselves by just mentioning the case studies. So we say, okay, so this is what you have mentioned. Does it make sense? We have several case studies where we helped companies similar to yours. Would you like to check it? So maybe you'll just have some insights, right? So that was the lowest hanging fruit. Vlad, would you like to add something?
No, I was actually thinking about the questions that we are getting about the podcast itself. And, it doesn't have to be a podcast, by the way. You can do a similar play and create other kinds of content. We've done this also with the market research report. We've done this also with, writing a guide and getting quotes and insights from people, interviewing them for that. Your write-up posts. You can do any sort of content collaboration, doesn't have to be a podcast. And another just idea that I wanted to share with everybody is that people, when they think of a podcast, they think of, okay, but who is going to listen to it, right? And that's like a big question that people have. And it is something that I also sometimes struggle with, but actually always think about, actually, that doesn't matter. What the play is all about, it is about building relationships. Now, over time, you're actually doing something very special, because think about this. Who do your buyers trust? They don't really trust you if they don't know you yet. They don't trust brands, right? They trust people who are like them. They trust, their peers, their colleagues. They trust maybe thought leaders and influencers. So at the end, you are actually doing something very special, and you're co-creating content with the people that they already trust, which helps enormously. The easiest way for you to build influence and trust is to tap into an existing influence and trust. It's like, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to, because you mentioned that who will be listening to this podcast, right? Something that I said, if you have Chris Walker on your podcast, then you can expect lots of downloads, right, of your episode. And I completely agree with you that when you have people who are not well known in this let's say in B2B marketing world, it's hard to expect lots of downloads. But I would love to mention two things. First one is what you said. It's all about the relationship. And basically for these people, yeah, in our case, it's easier because they get this, let's say, kind of affinity with other thought leaders. So they're on the same level. So we play with, not, of course, we are not saying it like this. We are not positioning it like this, but they feel it as they are part of, they're on the same ladder, right? So that's the first thing. The second one, it's all about the questions you're asking on the podcast. Look, we ask with Vlad is usually hosting these calls, and on pre-interview call, he's discussing, he tries to find the angles for the conversation, tries to find really something unique, try to find these unique insights he can share with our audience. And also the questions that I mentioned, like if you are executive, how would you like to be approached, right? If you'll get a personalized, let's say, direct mail spec, how would you reply back or no? So we're validating a bunch of ideas and we are generating these unique insights. And quite often these insights are more valuable than the stuff that is coming from thought leaders, from my subjective point of view. And now the funniest fact, before we went live today, I checked our podcast hosting software and just opened the last 30 days. And two most popular episodes by downloads were episodes with Bastian and Jan, who are CMOs of two big Belgian tech companies. So not Andy Colligan, no Pep Lyer, who were on our podcast, but two guys who are VP of marketing at top Belgian B2B tech companies. That's an answer to that question.
I love it.
I would love to move to the activation part, because quite often, again, we are sharing our podcast case, our ABM case study, right? So we had podcast as a warm-up, and quite often people tend to think that podcast is like a clickbait. So you invite people and then you pitch at the end of the call, which is absolutely no, that's definitely something that you shouldn't be doing. There are no pitches. It's all about relationship. You have opportunity to introduce yourself. You have opportunity to ask questions, what we did, right? We asked about challenges, priorities, goals, etc. And we mentioned the case studies. But then we have the activation part. So we usually, after, again, it depends. I believe Vlad can share the stats. From my point of view, it's 50-50, but Vlad knows better. He will just share it with us in a moment. Quite often we hear that people say, yeah, definitely share these case studies with us. And we have dedicated content hub, so it's like a low-hanging fruit to continue the engagement. And these people usually share these case studies with their in-house teams, which is the most important step for us in further nurturing and relationship. And we never do this activation. We do activation later. So, and this is exactly what will present.
All right. So I think there are like 2 points where you can activate people. And the first one is, actually, it can happen during the conversation, and it happened to me that people ask you at the end of the conversation, for example, okay, but what it is that you're doing, they're interested, they were checking you out. Or like Andre mentioned, they mention a specific challenge, and then you can say things like, oh, you mentioned that. And you mentioned that, you were struggling with getting leads now that your biggest trade shows were canceled, just to take that as an example. And, if you want, I'd like, we just had one client who launched a virtual event and had 2,000 signups and 334 opportunities, etc. If you want, we can share this with you. So it's not a pitch. It is like the next step in the conversation. Like Andre mentioned, people take you up on that, and like he said, they also share it with their teams. We just had like the biggest company, the biggest B2B tech company does that exactly, like share our case study with their field marketing team who is in charge of the ABM. But back to the slide at hand, or the point at hand. So how did we activate people? What is the second point? So the first point is during the conversation. The second point is actually, we have done account research and have done something with that. So that was, again, I'll be honest, and I've been learning this also from Andre, and I was a bit skeptical about it. And especially when it comes to sending a person, like checking people out, checking out their hobbies, their interests, and then sending something that's related to that. I was like, aren't people going to perceive that as being stalked? Or, are there people going to freak out about it? But I mean, I had 100% very positive response rate on this outreach. So let me give you an example. So in this case, I've been speaking to a CEO who is into alpine biking, cycling, right? He likes to go every summer with his friends and family to the Alps and on mountain bikes, and then have these beautiful cycling trips. And that's something that Andre discovered via his Facebook profile, because she shared that. And so we decided to buy him a book, and then not just buy a book with the best mountain bike tours, but also actually write our pitch, if you like, our letter that we wrote, which is 100% personalized, using that as a kind of an angle, a kind of a hook. Why? Well, and why direct mail? Well, look, first of all, in the age of automation that we live in, where everybody is receiving so much junk LinkedIn messages and emails, etc., direct mail stands out, especially if the direct mail is so personalized. Like, people get a parcel, with a personalized, thoughtful little gift. I don't want to talk about big gifts. It's not about a value. It's about the thought that you put in it, like in this case. And then it's, this is what they're passionate about. This is what they're interested in. You're sending them something, and then you're writing about it. So they're 100%, there's 100% open rates and 100% actually they're going to read it. And, we actually, in all these cases, we had people respond to us very positively. But we would build a metaphor, like in this case. So what do B2B cycling and sales, what B2B cycling, that would be something, right? What do cycling and B2B sales have in common? And then we start the story around it. But second, what is really, really cool about it is I have spoken to this person, right? So I have said, I said here, during our call, you mentioned that you were looking to develop an inbound market. That was true. And to replace some of the canceled trade shows, because I know that they were getting all this business from trade shows and they were canceled. Unfortunately, this happened during the COVID lockdowns. And so instead of talking about generic challenges and goals, I can talk about their challenges and their goals, because they share them with me. I know this. I mean, I've spoken to them, right? So this is why this is so powerful.
And one more thing, that basically after every interview Vladimir hosted with our prospects, we always discussed each of the interviews and we came up with the ideas. If we always, how we work on this, we say to each other, okay, if we were hired by this team, how could we help them? So if we were in charge of growing that company, right? And we map out all the practical ideas that we can do. And that's why Vlad, in proposal in this pitch, we mentioned that we had a chat with Andre and we came up with practical ideas. So you just see the first part of the pitch, but it always makes sense to give this context to people, right? And here is also the gift. So as you see, we mentioned that hope you like the small gift. This book will reveal the beautiful and untapped truths for your next ride.
This is another one that we did. We had some fun here. We superimposed the founders' faces on. They built an analytics solution, right? So we superimposed their faces on. And they're geeks, right? So we did it with with the characters from what is it? I'm not a good enough geek here. Is it Star Trek or or the other one? But basically, we did it like that, and they're all about dashboards. So it had the whole story was there. But what was very nice is this picture that you see here. This is not a picture that we have made. This is a picture that our prospect has sent over. And by the way, what's interesting about this specific prospect is that, we were talking about, outreach, and he said, I never respond to cold emails. I never respond to outreach. Never, ever, never, ever. And I was saying, but wait a minute, you and I are talking, you responded to my outreach. Oh, yeah, but that was different, right? So I wanted to share that anecdote.
Yeah, I believe.
I know, Jim. I know. I am bad. I'm one of these geeks who is not into Star Trek. He's not into Star Wars. And one of those men who is not into sports and football. Yes, sorry. I'm Vlad. I'm a weirdo.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. That's why I need a partner.
Exactly. Partner in crime. So one more thing that I would love to mention, which absolutely makes sense. It always say it's optional, but it works like a magic. So we always add to our pitches QR code that links to our Content Hub with case studies. The reason why, because then we know they might not respond to your message. They might not respond to your follow-up and whatever. So, but the key here is that with the help of Content Hubs, we track the content engagement. We know what they checked. And based on this, we personalize the follow-up and we know when to reach out. And basically, probably you can share the process, how we do it, right? So we have, I will just give you one quick hint. We always send it, if it's in United States, we always send it via FedEx. If in Europe, we always send it via UPS or DHL, depending on the region. Why? Because when you receive it from this courier, right, you know that it's urgent, it's important, and the chances that you'll open it very high. And then when you open it, you see a gift, you see some documents, and the gift provokes your curiosity, right? So you want to check what's inside, and that's why we have so successful reply rate. So on the slides, you can see some examples, but I believe Vlad can share the entire process with you.
So you mean in the terms of sales follow-up, or in terms of how we are sending the parcels and?
No, I just mentioned how we send it. So I believe the follow-up process is good.
Okay, so basically, what we always do is you have built a relationship with your target, right? So you have, you know their challenges, you have qualified them, you've spoken about it, you have now sent this like personal attention. And the best way to do this, if you're running that, and especially if you have a team and you have some people working in sales, etc., is to do a sales follow-up on based on this. And you can do this in a very timely manner. And it's definitely not a cold call. You're actually calling to follow up on the gift. But what is very nice about it is that you have sent there a letter introducing your product or your service, and you can naturally start talking about it, and you can go into the conversation, and you can do either of the two things. First thing, you can basically get a yes, you can create an opportunity, right? If you do it right, and if their timing is right, etc. But two, if you don't, unlike any other campaign that you may run, where you will get basically a binary response. My campaign worked, my campaign didn't work, but you don't know why. So you can ask them questions about what really resonated with them and what didn't resonate with them. So you can basically ask them a number of questions to understand what in this campaign has been successful and what wasn't successful. And then you can use this information to, for example, update your targeting. Okay, so, maybe we need another account selection or disqualification criterion that we didn't think of before, or obviously update the way that you are, writing these messages, the way you're presenting your solution, etc. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, let's share quickly the follow-up process and how you personalize the follow-ups based on the Content Hub engagement.
Yeah, so that's another piece of the puzzle. So because you can also, because like Andre mentioned, we will include the QR code on the printed material and obviously a link in the digital material to the Content Hub. The Content Hub contains, some basic documents like the case studies that Andre mentioned, the benefits of working with us, etc. And what was really, really cool is if you use a tool like Paperflight or whatever other tool that you use to share this Content Hub, share these documents, is you have these analytics. And so you know what content they've consumed up to a level of a single page. So they've spent most time on, our case study and about, on a page about campaign orchestration. So you, instead of like reaching out to them, again, with the generic message, you can say something like that, something like, oh, okay, I shared this with you and I was wondering what you thought about it. A lot of people were asking me about the campaign orchestration, and if that's something that's also of interest to you, be happy to jump on a call and explain that. Just taking that as an example. But basically what this gives you is gives you insight to basically timely and relevant personalized follow-up.
And to share a specific example, let's look at the first example. You see that this person checked the document called what kind of results our clients are seeing from engaging with us. And person spent 1 minute reading this document, right? Then in the analytics, we can see on which specific testimonial they spend the most time. And of course, at that time, we didn't document all of our case studies, and that wasn't the goal. So we just collected all the testimonials we had with Vlad and put into one document. And then we said, when we see that they spend most time on specific testimonial, then we say, if you'd like, we can have a call where I can share the behind the scenes of this campaign. We didn't document this case study, but I can explain you and show how did we launch that campaign, what were the resources, timeline, etc. And I can share with you some examples of campaign materials, if you will. So that's how it was personalized. And then the next one is basically the next step is reaching out when engagement trigger hits, right? So that was a question, and I believe it totally makes sense to address it right now. So the question was from Alexei, what is the sales cycle for such kind of lead nurturing? I love this question, and I will reply simply. Look, we completely realize, and I believe everybody in B2B space who is selling high-ticket service or high-ticket product should realize that our sales cycle and our sales and marketing process is completely different to the buying process, which means that we want to sell, let's say, but it doesn't mean that our prospects are buying right now. That's the first step. And we completely realize that once you accept this fact, the things will change for you. So for us, it's the first meaningful connection. We know if they are not buying, they might have different priorities, right? They might different goals, needs, etc. at this moment. So we accept it. And we know that even if there won't be opportunity right now, this opportunity might appear in 8, 9, 10 months, because then we have one principle with Vlad: never stop nurturing. So we don't, after this campaign, we don't stop relationship with these people just because they didn't hire us, right? So just because we didn't sign a contract, but we continue chatting with them, engaging with their content, congratulating them with their investments or achievements. We invite them to our events. If we produce a new blog post or whatever which is relevant to this company, we are sending personal email or message. So we have lots of non-sales touches. So considering this specific campaign, again, coming back to the goals of this campaign, we had 2 goals. The first one is validate an idea of our offering, and the second one, generating 3 contracts. This was our goal, just to see if we achieve it, then we just start fullfunnel.io. So as you see, we are 1 year old. Basically, as you understand, we achieved that goal, right? So coming back to my explanation, again, keep in mind that not everybody will immediately purchase your product or service or even have a call with you to discuss it, So that's why I mentioned you need to continue nurturing, and you need to track these engagement triggers I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast. And that's a practical example. You can see the follow-ups, or Vlad, probably you could talk more about this.
No, this definitely, because at a certain moment I mentioned this story about them. Actually, a prospect that I met during a podcast, and I started building a relationship, came back to our website several months later and started checking out, amongst others, the consulting page when I reached out to them, and that's how we closed the deal. But basically, it is a long game. We did have immediate sales after this campaign. But that's not something that you can expect to have with every prospect. But like I said, and Andre mentioned, you build this amazing relationship, and they totally stay on your radar. We have created some really nice fans out of these podcast guests. And there was another question in terms of like direct outreach by Stefan, whether you sometimes can you do direct outreach via mail, like Andre just described, without the warm-up campaign, and have we ever done it? Well, I just wanted to share with you stuff. So the answer is yes, you can do that, and I shared a link to a case study describing that campaign, right? So we can talk about it if you have some specific questions after we kind of wrap it up, but the short answer is yes. How do we the follow-up here? The follow-up is actually, getting those conversations started again, but getting the conversation started about what you have shared with them, like I mentioned. And what you have shared with them is basically proposal for the next steps, starting those conversations. Actually, this guy, it was Christmas, and we eventually started having the conversation. I think it was a few months ago. So sometimes it takes time because they were not buying at the moment. And then when they were buying, we were definitely there on top of their list. So what was that? Yes, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one. That was the one that we created a relationship. They were following us on LinkedIn, and then they visited our page. We saw somebody in your company visit our consulting page and start filling out, but didn't finish. And just reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Well spotted. So let's talk about it. And we had basically started a conversation and closed this deal.
Yeah, so the campaign results, right? So let's nail it down. 76% response rate, 42% positive response rate, 6 sales qualified opportunities, 3 contracts. So these are the business outcomes. But the most important outcomes for us were not even these business numbers. We actually achieved 3, for me personally, way more important goals. We created an evergreen process that we are using, and it doesn't take us lots of time. Next one, we created user-generated content, which helps us to boost our presence on LinkedIn, sharing our LinkedIn insights. I'm not going to brag about my LinkedIn content, of course, but just because of this content and these unique insights, we are getting so many inquiries, and we are getting a fantastic feedback basically from our community. People say that they reach out and say, so thanks a lot, because this content is something that provides unique perspective on B2B marketing, something that is not everybody is talking about. We are not talking, hey, marketing is psychology, or all you need in marketing is just master copywriting, or don't work for a CEO who doesn't get marketing. I'm not playing that game. I'm not going to be a populist, sharing some how to say politely, some not really actionable stuff. And finally, the relationships with decision makers, because that was the key point. We always say Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. These are our core or domestic region, if you will. Historically, we have had lots of clients there. We have quite a solid brand recognition. We are well known there. And for us, the goal was to move up market. So we wanted to reach out and connect with these biggest companies. And as I said, I completely realized that we won't be able to close all of them just because this is just the first meaningful engagement we had. But the results, and you also see a bunch of screenshots with messages with the replies, the results are absolutely worth it. So I believe that's it. Now, guys, it's time for Q&A. So all your questions are valuable, are very welcome. Feel free to ask your questions in the Zoom chat or switch on your camera and go ahead. Any questions are welcome. I see one question from Stefan. He asked about the relationship via direct mail and to invite them on the podcast. So I just, in our case, no, we didn't send a direct mail just to invite them to our podcast. No, we didn't do it. But can you do it? Absolutely, yes. Why not? So, but in this case, I suggest you to leverage our approach. So the documents that we shared with you that we use in our Content Hub, right? I highly recommend you to print these documents explaining the process, explaining the show, the topics you are going to talk about, right? The questions, etc. So you'll expect way higher positive reply rate. Any other questions? Let me quickly check. No, I don't. So there was one more from Konstantin. So invite them to the podcast and you send the direct mail later. Yes, absolutely correct. This is exactly how we are doing this. As I said, we analyze every interview. We come up. We always think about how could we grow this company considering the context. Right? If we were in the shoes of, let's say, of a marketer in this company. So we always come up with practical ideas. And when you do this way, then you'll be able to really personalize your pitch and come up with practical ideas, not just sending generic one, hey, you know, we help B2B tech, because that's our broad positioning, right? We help B2B tech companies to generate enterprise opportunities with account-based marketing. So we don't send it, we send exactly how we are going to do it. So no, it's just considering your question, would you consider this one-to-one or one-to-few? No, this in our case, look, in our case, we always do one-to-one. It's in at fullfunnel.io, it's always one-to-one play. We don't need that much companies. We are not going to be the biggest consultant company in the world, and we don't have these goals. So we are absolutely, we know our capacity, and we are absolutely happy to maintain our existing capacity and not going to, let's say, expand it.
I think it's an interesting question. This is definitely one-on-one. And there was also, you asked, I think also Konstantin asked about scaling, right? And so I think this is an interesting point because, and this is just from our perspective and our experience, the way that scaling really works for us is not so much through scaling these kind of campaigns, although this is something you can absolutely do. I mean, somebody asked me, how many conversations should I have on the podcast with prospects? And so a question to think about is how many prospect conversations you want to have. You know, there is no reason for you, if you have the time, to do like 1 or 2 conversations each day. I mean, you can scale it from that perspective. You can scale it to other segments, etc. But it is something that you would do for top tier accounts. Now, what really works for us in terms of scaling is demand generation. And so other than addressing a specific segment with a campaign like this, we constantly keep on sharing content, organizing these kind of live podcasts, webinars, partner webinars, summits. We, just every day we are there on LinkedIn. So this is actually what really works for us in terms of scaling. And you see, I shared today a post about, I was calculating in terms of inbound inquiries that we are getting, you really see an exponential growth. And that is the reason that it is like that. That's how demand gen scales, because the more you repeat it, the more you're building your audience, your trust and authority. And each of these have a kind of a compounding multiplication impact on anything you do. And so over time, you're going to see that that kind of exponential growth on that for sure.
Thanks a lot for a brilliant explanation, Vlad. Quick question to you guys. How did you find this podcast episode? Was it valuable? Did you get some insights? Share with us in the Zoom chat, please. And while you are sharing, I dropped a link to our podcast page, so you could check it and also subscribe on your favorite platform, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, whatever you prefer. And you can find all the previous podcast episodes with Chris Walker, Gaetana, Dennis Yu, John Miller from Demand Base. We had so many wonderful guests. That's because this episode is episode number 71. So I believe you'll get lots of insights. Mike, thank you so much. And Konstantin as well. Thanks a lot for great engagement, for great questions. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. Alexei as well. Happy to hear that it was valuable for you. Yeah, please share with your team. Hope it will inspire them. Thanks a lot for attending us. Thanks a lot for great engagement, for great questions. Let's connect on LinkedIn and see you at the next episodes. Cheers.
Cheers.
You need to stop recording.
Yeah, it's stopped, I think. Yeah.